Mr. President, it's good to welcome you back to snowy Washington, D.C. I know that you were back home in Alaska, where, while they may not have had snow, they got everybody else's attention with a 7.1 earthquake. So I know that it was an interesting weekend for you as well. Mr. President, I'm here on the Senate floor this morning with a fair amount of excitement and enthusiasm. We are beginning the debate on energy legislation, energy reform legislation, a bill, Senate Bill 2012, the Energy Policy Modernization Act. Mr. President, this is the first time that the United States Senate has debated energy policy reform in more than 8 years. More than 8 years that we've had this kind of debate. I was here yesterday morning. We had an opportunity to open the floor up. I opened, Senator Collins was in the chair. It was kind of one of those interesting mornings where everybody else seemed to be female around the floor, and the press has taken note of that. But that's not my point. I left here and I went out in the hallway, and there was a group of about 8 or 9 young kids with a fellow who works on the House side, and I think he was giving them a little bit of a field trip, but actually I think he had kid duty because school was closed. And we had a fabulous conversation, as you can have with kids of that age that are excited about being in the Capitol and understanding the difference between a House member and a Senate member. And they said, well, what are you working on? I said, well, it's really exciting because we're going to be taking up energy legislation, reform legislation. We haven't done it in a long time. And I said, you kids, when were you born? And the one little girl says, 2007. And I said, well, 2007 is the last time that we had energy legislation on the floor. And I said, look what's happened to you in the 8 years that you've been here. You've grown. You've gotten smarter. You've been exposed to a lot of things. Sometimes it helps to put passage of time in relation to our kids because we can see that. Mr. President, it is long, long overdue to be debating energy legislation on the floor of this Senate. This is a good bill. It is a timely bill, and it is a bipartisan bill. And it deserves overwhelming support from this chamber. And I was encouraged by the minority leader's comments and his encouragement that through the process that we have built in the Energy Committee to move out a bipartisan bill, it should enjoy the respect of good debate as we move forward to again attempt to modernize our energy policies. At the beginning here, Mr. President, I want to acknowledge the good work, the strong work, the very cooperative work that I have received from my ranking member, Senator Cantwell, from the state of Washington, and just thank her for helping me craft this bill, because it was truly a joint effort. It was a very collaborative effort. I also want to thank the other members of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee for all the ideas that they brought to bear and the support that we have received to them in bringing the bill to this point. To give folks a little bit of a background on how we came to have this energy bill up, first real substantive legislation that we've had here in 2016. But I think it's worthwhile to talk about how we got here, because that in and of itself is a little bit unusual nowadays. And I just need to segue just a moment, because it was just last year at this time that Senator Cantwell and I were managing the floor when we had the Keystone XL debate. It was the first time that we had seen, quote, regular order with a full-on amendment process in a long time. A lot of people didn't even know how to process these amendments. And so we worked through some 40-odd amendments, got everybody's attention on, hey, you can actually move a bill that has some level of controversy. We didn't obviously agree on many aspects of it, but we moved through a process. Well, it's January again, and the women are back at work, and I am hopeful that the collaborative effort that got this bipartisan bill to the floor here today will be reflected in the debate that goes for us. We sat down, Senator Cantwell and I sat down last January when I became the chairman of the committee, and we talked about goals and priorities, what we were looking for, and we both said, it is time, it is well past time that we update our energy policies, that we do a scrub, that we do an overhaul. And we had a conversation about how we might go about it, because there's a couple ways that you can proceed around here. I could have drafted my own bill with my own priorities and tried to get the votes that I needed to move it out of committee. But if you don't have the support beyond just your partisan side of the aisle, it's going to be tough to be able to advance it to the floor and to get it enacted into law. And Senator Cantwell could have done the same. She could have moved her own bill. We could have done messaging bills, but we both agreed we're well past the time for messaging. We need to be legislating. We need to be governing in the energy space. And so in order to do it, it's going to take some cooperation. It's going to take some collaboration. It's going to take some conversations. And that's where we started it. I went around to colleagues on the committee and began conversations with them about their energy-related priorities. And it continued with our committee staff. They held dozens of bipartisan listening sessions with stakeholders. We held them here in Washington, D.C. We held them in other parts of the country. We held one in Quigillangock, Alaska. You know where that is. Most others know it as only some faraway village in Alaska, but it was important to do a level of reach out. After our listening sessions, we came back here, really rolled up our sleeves. We held 4 oversight hearings and began with a real kind of 30,000-foot look about where are we in different energy spaces. So we had our oversight hearings. Then we moved down to 6 legislative hearings on a total of 114 different bills. Now, these were 114 different bills that were not necessarily introduced by just members of the Energy Committee. These were bills that were introduced by Republicans and Democrats throughout the Senate, and some House members' bills that we had seen as well. 114 different separate measures. We took the testimony that we received from experts and advocates and from private citizens and from administration officials and from our home states and just about every other state. We really did that reach out. We gathered all the perspectives that we could about what Congress should do and what Congress needs to do to ensure that our federal policies keep up with the years of change in energy markets and energy technologies. And I think one just simple case in point that reminds us of this 8-year passage of time. 8 years ago, when we talked about LNG, what we were talking about was seeing if we couldn't structure our LNG terminals so that they could be import terminals. Think about where we are now. We're talking about how we export our LNG, how we move to share our energy wealth with others. That's a prime example of making sure that what is happening within our energy markets, what is happening within our energy technologies, is consistent with what our policies, our laws, and our regulations allow. So After we did all this gathering of information, we entered weeks of bipartisan negotiation to determine which bills should be incorporated into our draft text. And from that, from the 114, we took 50 different bills that, as you flip through the 400 some odd pages of this Energy Policy Modernization Act, you will see bits and pieces of 50 different measures offered by colleagues, Republicans and Democrats throughout the Senate here. Senator Portman has been a leader on energy efficiency, working with Senator Shaheen and being able to incorporate their efficiency provisions. The critical minerals bill that I've been working on for years now, you will see incorporated within. But again, not just taking the ideas that this senator from Alaska or that senator from Washington has and giving you a bill for consideration. We have really solicited your ideas, your input. The next step was really the last step on the committee, and that was when we went to markup. We held 3 days of markup. 3 days is a pretty good time to spend in committee. We dispensed with nearly 60 amendments. It's actually 59 here, we rounded it up. But because of that very collaborative process, because we really did solicit ideas from all sides, what we ended up with when we moved that bill out of committee was an 18-4 vote. We agreed to report the energy bill to the full Senate for further consideration, and that's how we got to where we are today. And I wish that I could say, Mr. President, that we see more of this type of really collaborative effort. We don't see it all the time. But where we did see it last year and where we have seen legislative success is worth noting. The education bill that was shepherded by Senator Alexander and Senator Murray was also a very collaborative process. I serve on the HELP committee. I sat through the many hours of debate and oversight and markups, and we were able to advance that bipartisan bill to the floor, a bill that moved out of committee unanimously, by the way. But we were able to advance that to the floor, where it enjoyed strong bipartisan support, went to conference with the House, and that bill is now signed into law. Another area where the leaders really work cooperatively and collaboratively. I commend Senator Boxer and Senator Inhofe for what they did on the highway bill to work through the issues that are not easy, but were absolutely necessary to get a longer-term highway transportation bill that doesn't come if you just kind of elbow your way through. It comes when you work together. I think that we have demonstrated on the Energy Committee that we have done just that, is working collaboratively. I have said it many times. The Energy Policy Modernization Bill is not the bill that I would have drafted if it were just up to me. And it is not the bill that Senator Cantwell would have drafted if it was just up to her, or the bill that any one of us that would have drafted if it was just up to him or her. But it is a bill that we wrote together. We wrote it as a committee, we wrote it as a team, and as a group of 22 senators who really care very deeply about our nation's energy policies. So as members are coming back, as they're looking at this bill, I would urge you to look at what is in the bill, what we have been able to find that common ground, where we have been able to find the common ground, and look and analyze that. Because I can guarantee you're going to find things that aren't in there that you wish were there. And you're going to say, Lisa, how come my X, Y, or Z is not part of this bill? That is true. There's some X, Y, and Z that's not in this bill that I would really like and that you would really like as two senators from the state of Alaska. But we don't have that opportunity to build a consensus on some of those issues right here, right now, today. So can we agree that what we have built with this bill advances our energy policies, brings us more up to speed, unloosens the chokehold that we have in certain areas? We spent months on this to modernize our energy policies to address both opportunities and challenges, and we found common ground in many, many areas. And I think we found common ground in more areas than we actually expected when we started this process out. Certainly good enough to write a good, solid bill. We ultimately organized our efforts into 5 main titles. We have efficiency, we have infrastructure, supply, accountability, and then conservation. We agreed to include the Energy Savings and Industrial Competitiveness Act. This is the efficiency measure that I mentioned just a moment ago that Senators Portman and Shaheen have been leading on for years. So to be able to incorporate the good work of the senator from Ohio and from New Hampshire, along with the support of 13 other members, to include that in here, I think is very important. We also agreed to include the LNG Permitting Certainty and Transparency Act. This was the act that Senator Barrasso led on, and 17 other members who joined with him in that very important measure. We also agreed to include My American Minerals Security Act, the Critical Minerals Bill, sponsored by Senator Risch of Idaho, Senator Crapo, Senator Heller of Nevada. Again, a piece that I think many would agree is vitally important. As we see vulnerability in our country on energy security, where we rely on others for sources of supply, we can't ever forget how important minerals are. And we don't want to go down that same road that we have been, for instance, with oil historically, when we're talking about our critical minerals. So this is a huge issue for us. We agreed to promote the use of clean, renewable hydropower, a priority for members from Western states, including Senator Gardner, who helped lead on this, Senator Daines, Senator Cantwell, myself. We agreed to expedite the permitting of natural gas pipelines without sacrificing any environmental review or public participation. This was an effort that was led by Senator Capito of West Virginia. We agreed to a new pilot program for oil and gas permitting. This was one of just many good ideas that Senator Hoeven of North Dakota advanced. We took up a proposal from Senator Collins of Maine to boost the efficiency within our schools. I think we all recognize that this is an area where we can and should try to do a little bit more. It saves us in the long run. And then Senator Klobuchar from Minnesota had a measure to increase the efficiency of buildings that are owned by nonprofits. We agreed to improve our nation's cybersecurity, an issue that we are all very keyed in on. This was from legislation that was originally presented by Senator Risch of Idaho, Senator Heinrich of New Mexico. We also saw an amendment from Senator Flake on this. We made innovation a key priority in our bill, with a recognition that there is a limited but a very, very useful role for the federal government to play early on in the development of new technologies. I just came from a meeting this morning, a summit on advanced nuclear technologies, and recognizing there, when you talk about nuclear and the future, innovation is so key to what we're building out. We agreed to reauthorize many of the energy-related portions of the America Competes Act. You'll recall that this was the measure that Senator Alexander has advanced in the past. So we took those energy-related pieces and have incorporated them. On some of the areas of renewable. Geothermal is one that I believe has enormous potential. We certainly have that potential in the state of Alaska, but we have it in other western states. This was a big priority for Senator Wyden and Senator Heller. Senator Wyden's legislation and the ideas that he has advanced in this space have been very, very key. We agreed to promote vehicle innovation. This was a priority that Senator Peters of Michigan, as well as Senator Stabenow of Michigan, and Senator Alexander of Tennessee have been working collaboratively on, so we were able to help advance that discussion with vehicle innovation. We agreed to renew the coal R&D program at the Department of Energy. This was based on a proposal that was advanced by Senator Manchin and Senator Capito, both of West Virginia, but Senator Portman was also very key in helping to advance that. We agreed to protect reliability within the electric sector, an incredibly important part of what we do within this legislation. We reform the loan guarantee program at the Department of Energy. Many of us believe strongly that reforms were necessary, and we have done just that to ensure that we don't have taxpayers at risk with certain aspects of that program. We agreed to reauthorize, and this was something that the minority leader mentioned, was the Land and Water Conservation Fund. As folks will recall, the reauthorization, or that authorization, expired towards the end of last year. We were successful within the omnibus to advance a 3-year extension of that. But what we did within the committee was we advanced permanent authorization of Land and Water Conservation Fund, but we put reforms within that program, reforms that were, again, endorsed by the full committee. We have a provision in there as well that helps to address the maintenance backlog within our national parks system. People understand that this year is the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service. It's something worthy of celebration. Unfortunately, we've got a real black eye when it comes to maintenance and upkeep of our parks. And so we have reviewed that issue and said we need to make steps to help address that in a way that is constructive. And then, Mr. President, there's a section of the bill that nobody will talk about. Press doesn't care to report about it, but I think it's a really pretty good section. And recognizing your interest in kind of regulatory reform, you'll be pleased to know that we cleaned up the U.S. Code. We delete dozens, there's actually 39 at my last count, dozens of provisions within it that are either obsolete or duplicative. We get these programs on the books, we put requirements for a study into law, and as long as they are still there, even though no one's reading that report anymore, even though that program is just now obsolete because of what has gone on, it's still on the books. So if you're worried about government spending and you're looking at the conservative reason to embrace what we're doing here, take a look at some of the provisions that we just get rid of. They're old, they're outdated, they're obsolete. So this is just kind of a sample of the good work that we have included within the bipartisan bill. I think many of the members that I listed are responsible for not just one provision, but for multiple provisions throughout the bill. Truly a team effort as we have worked this through. I think as we were counting up different parts of the bill where we have seen members contribute, more than half of the members of the Senate are sponsors or co-sponsors of at least one provision in the bill as we stand here today. So I think, again, that's representative of the process that Senator Cantwell and I have engaged in. So you may want to ask, so So, okay, you had a thorough process. What's in it? What good is it? What does it mean to me? How is this going to help our country from an energy policy perspective? How is it going to make sure that when we talk about energy security, translating to economic security and national security, how does this really all bind together? What does this do? How does this help our people? There are many practical benefits to modernizing our energy policy. And I'll start with just the first obvious one. Every time you do upgrades, whether it's in your house or within your business, you do upgrades, you become more efficient. You are typically, in this day and age, I don't know about you, but we've replaced the windows in our house. Not only did it make the house look a little bit better, but we're paying less for our utility bills. My husband just found a great deal on LEDs, and he's replaced all the light bulbs in the house. It took him a while, but he's there. And he's all excited about it now because it's going to reduce his costs. He's worried about costs. We should be worried about costs. This bill helps us reduce our costs. This bill also allows us a cleaner energy future, because when you modernize your infrastructure, when you use less, you reduce much of your emissions. So for those who will be critical, it says, by gosh, you didn't fix the issue of climate change. Look through this bill and tell me if it doesn't make for a cleaner energy future for this country. And this bill helps us produce more energy to be less reliant on others. It helps Americans save energy. Again, when we save energy, we save money, and it's just a more efficient environment. It will help ensure that our energy can be transported from where it is produced to where it is needed. It's a big challenge that we have nowadays, Mr. President. It will bolster our status as the most innovative nation in the world. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we be the most innovative nation in the world when it comes to energy? We have the resources here. Let's develop the technologies that allow us to access them in a way that is responsible, with good environmental stewardship, that creates jobs, that creates economic opportunities, that truly allows us to be more energy resilient. Why shouldn't we be the innovators and the leaders? Let's not cede that to anyone. Our bill will allow our manufacturers to thrive without fears of high costs or crippling shortages, and it will cement our status as a global energy superpower as we provide a share of our surplus to our allies and trading partners. Isn't that nice to know that not only can our energy be good for us and for America, but it can be good from a geopolitical perspective, helping our friends and our allies. That, when you think about the energy security, economic security, and the national security that comes with energy, that's where it all knits together. The Energy Policy Modernization Act will boost our economy, our security, and our international competitiveness, all at the same time. It will help our families save money. It will help our businesses save hundreds of billions of dollars. It frees up budgets. It frees up our ability to place priorities elsewhere. It will help assure that our energy remains abundant. It remains affordable, even as it becomes more clean and more diverse in supply. And it will do all of this, Mr. President, without raising taxes, without imposing new mandates, and without adding to the federal deficit. So, again, you're getting great gain for our economy, good jobs, security from a host of different ways, We are able to do this without raising taxes, without imposing new mandates, and without adding to the federal deficit. This is a good bill. This is a bill that is designed to go the distance. It's designed to make a difference. And I'm confident that we can proceed through this floor debate. We can make it even better. Because for the half of the senators that have participated in this one way or another, there's another half that want to weigh in. And I welcome that. I welcome that. I think that that is part of this process. This is part of the commitment that we're making to an open amendment process. But I would hope, Mr. President, that we can focus on the good that is within this bill and work to make it better and avoid the gotchas and avoid the poison pills. Avoid those things that are designed to do nothing more than to bring a bill down by making perhaps a political point that isn't going to go anywhere. I really ask my colleagues, let's treat this bill on the floor with the same seriousness that the Energy and Natural Resources Committee treated it throughout this months-long process. Let's come together as senators in the United States Senate to really help make a difference with our energy policies. Let's work to enhance this. And so with that, I encourage members to come down, file your amendments on the floor. We know that there's a bunch of rumored amendments out there, and we welcome them. But we all know that we've been delayed now by the snow a couple days, and we've got work to do. So I would urge colleagues to come down to the floor, file your amendments. I would also remind members that if an amendment costs money, it is going to need to be paired with a viable offset, because we don't want to be in a situation where we just can't work through that. I would also remind the Senate that we are considering Senate Bill 2012. This is not a House shell. So we will need to table any tax amendments, because we don't want to be in a situation where we've got a blue slip that prevents us from advancing to conference. So I'm just throwing that out there. You may have issues that you'd like to bring up, but if it costs money, you've got to have an offset, and we simply can't do the tax amendments. And I know that, because there's actually some that I'm interested in as well. I think Senator Cantwell and I are both in the same situation. We know that an open amendment process on an energy bill that hasn't seen floor action in a long time, it could have the effect of unkinking the hose. And we know that there's a lot of folks that have a lot of good ideas and perhaps hundreds of ideas that this bill could include. So our intent is to work just as hard as we can and as fast as we can to process as many of these bills as possible. Tomorrow, we expect to have a pretty busy day. Hopefully, by the end of the day, we will have reached some consent agreement as to what votes for tomorrow would look like. But my hope is that we will be here voting tomorrow to really start processing many of the amendments here. It is unfortunate that we have lost a few working days to the snowstorm, but that's nothing, Mr. President, that's nothing compared to the 8 years that we have lost as we have let our energy policies just languish. So we know we're in a place in a space where our policies have failed to keep up with changes in the market and the advances in technology. We know that our policies in many areas are outdated, with the opportunities being ignored, and the challenges are going unaddressed. So we are here. It's time to have the debate. It's time to work through an amendment process. It's time to pass an energy bill here in the United States Senate. And after the model, again, of the highway bill, of the education reform, and the very good work that so many in this body have put towards this bipartisan effort, my hope is that the Energy Policy Modernization Act will be the next bipartisan accomplishment on behalf of the American people. So with that, Mr. President, I will yield to my ranking member and good partner in all things energy, Senator Cantwell. And again, a very sincere thank you for your very cooperative and good working relationship throughout all of this. Thank you.